I titled this video Type of Students, and you must be wondering as to what am I doing here talking about type of students. So let me just hold on to the suspense as I take you through this video. Okay, let us imagine a situation. It's the beginning of a very important academic year. For example, let us say we are talking of high school and grade 12 probably, right? A very important academic year. Right? Important in the sense that it is very critical to get good grades, so a student gets admission in a reputed institution of his or her choice. Right? What is the common scenario at the beginning of such an academic year? The common scenario is there is a communication, a discussion between the parent and the student about the importance of the academic year. Right? Parents explain to the student as to this is a very important academic year, and they discuss work habits and how the student should remain focused on the academic part so that he ends up in an institution of his choice. And what is the response of a student to that communication or discussion? Now, based on that response that a student gives, we can have different type of students. I'll begin with type 1. Right? Parents have a discussion about work habits because it's an important academic year. The student, if he's very sincere, committed, focused, continues to study throughout the academic year, and no reminders are required. Right? In such a case, at the end of the year, what generally may happen is the student ends up with good grades. Right? So this is type 1. Right? Type 2. Right? If you look at type 2 students, again a similar situation. That we have parents have a dialogue and discussion happens, student starts working hard, but other influences like television, Facebook, mobiles come into play, and the student loses his enthusiasm and focus. Right? Type 3. Right? Again, there is an initial discussion, other influences come into play, and the student's enthusiasm or focus decreases. But in this case, the parents are aware of this. They take notice of that, and they once again have a discussion with the student. Again, the student starts working hard, and the parents continue to remind at regular intervals throughout the academic year. And in such a case, what happens is the student may end up with what we can call as acceptable grades. Right? And finally, type 4. The most desirable situation. Parents have an initial conversation, students works hard, right? But the parents are continuously in touch with the student, right? Whenever he does well in the class, maybe for the unit test or any other assessment that happens, they encourage the student. There's a constant communication happening between the student and the parent. The student is also very committed and focused. So both the student and the parent encourage each other. There is a constant communication. The student gets encouraged and works harder. And this cycle continues throughout the year. And what we end up with probably is excellent grades. Right? So, based on the student's response, there can be 4 types of a student. Okay, let's say we have a pendulum. Right? And again, you must be wondering as to what am I doing here? I have talked about type of students and now suddenly shifting to a pendulum, right? Okay, just stay with me for a couple of minutes more. This is a pendulum. Let us say it has got a natural frequency F1. Right? Let us say we apply a force F, right? Force F is applied. The pendulum starts oscillating. Now, if the medium in which it is oscillating, for example, air, if I assume that it has got negligible friction, then the pendulum would continue to oscillate for a very long time without any substantial reduction in its amplitude. So if I plot a graph, the graph would look something like this. Right? And you can see there is no appreciable decrease in the amplitude. Right? But if we assume or if we think that this medium is offering substantial damping or friction, then the graph would look something like this. As you can see, every moment the amplitude keeps on decreasing and finally the vibrations die out. So this pendulum would vibrate, the amplitude would continue to decrease, and finally it would come to a standstill. This is assuming that there is friction being offered by the medium. Okay, I'm sure you have been able to make a connection with the type of students that we discussed and the type of vibrations over here. This is type 1 student, right? The parent or the force is applied on the pendulum once, and the pendulum continues to oscillate without decrease in amplitude, right, throughout. Whereas in this case, the force is applied once, the pendulum oscillates, but because of external forces, damping forces, or because of external distractions like Facebook, mobile, the amplitude decreases and finally dies out. Right? This is type 2. In physics, these type of vibrations are known as free vibrations, and these are known as damped vibrations. Okay. Now, if you look at the other two types, right? Okay. So let us again assume that we have a pendulum over here which has got a natural frequency F1. Let us say we apply a force F onto this pendulum starts oscillating, and in this case let us assume that this force is periodic in nature. That means it keeps on coming at some regular frequency, let us call that frequency F, at some frequency F, and keeps on hitting the pendulum. Now if F is not equal to F1, that means the frequency of this external force and the frequency of the pendulum is not equal. Right? Not equal. What is observed is, over a period of time, the pendulum starts oscillating with frequency F, the frequency of the external periodic force. In other words, the force imposes its frequency onto this pendulum, and the pendulum starts oscillating with frequency F. Right? What would happen if F equal to F1? In that case, again the pendulum starts oscillating, right, with the frequency F, which is its natural frequency. Right? So in both the cases, the force imposes its frequency onto the pendulum. But the difference here is that when F is not equal to F1, the pendulum oscillates with a very small amplitude. Right? So amplitude is very, very less. So in this case, amplitude is very less. But when F equal to F1, when there is a frequency match over here, the pendulum starts oscillating with a large amplitude. So in this case, the pendulum would oscillate with a very large amplitude. The reason is because this force is imposing its frequency, which again happens to be its natural frequency, and therefore it oscillates with large amplitude. So if you again go back and compare this with the type of students we discussed, this is type 3 student and this is type 4 student. Type 3, because the parents apply a force or have a communication with the student starts working, but damping forces come into play. The force again comes, again makes it vibrate. But the amplitude is not very large, because in this case, the pendulum is oscillating with not its natural frequency, but the frequency of the external periodic force. But yes, there is some amount of amplitude, and therefore we get acceptable grades. Acceptable grades. Whereas in this case, there is a frequency match. Right? The pendulum is oscillating with its natural frequency. The force is also asking it to oscillate with its natural frequency. And therefore we get a large amplitude, and therefore we get with excellent grades. Okay. In physics, these type of vibrations are known as forced vibration. Forced vibration. Whereas this is also an example of forced vibration, because there is an external force acting onto the pendulum and making it vibrate. But we have a special name for this, resonance. Resonance. Because here there is a frequency match and there is a larger amplitude. So special name for that, resonance. Okay. I'll end this video by just summarizing the comparisons that we did. Right? The correlations that we observed. The student is the body on which the force is applied. In this case, it was the pendulum. The parent is the external force. The parent explain and remind again and again. So the parent can be seen as an external periodic force. TV, cell phones, everything else are frictional forces or damping forces. The number of times parents remind, right, throughout the year, frequency, and the student's effort is the amplitude. Right? Okay. I hope this analogy that we used between the type of students and type of vibrations will help you understand all the different types of vibrations: free, damped, forced, and resonance. Remember, in these two, the force is applied only once, whereas here in these two cases, the force is external periodic force, which keeps on coming again and again to vibrate the body. I hope this analogy is going to help you retain and understand this type of vibrations very well. Thank you.